Ken would send Bruce and I an email every morning asking us for a specific incident to write about, and I would write my version of the incident, and Bruce would write his version of the incident, and we'd send them to Ken. Ken would read them and combine them together with his own details and input from what he knew about us. And then occasionally, if he had a question, he would email us a question back, like, what did you have for dinner that day, or what was the weather like? And we'd respond those questions back or answer those questions, and he would incorporate them into the chapter, then send us the chapter to read and edit.
And he was also pretty adamant about getting the details correct, the facts correct. So he would routinely request information or documents, and we'd send him that information as well. Well, yes, there were. One was in the process of searching for the families that both Andrea and I undertook, but primarily Andrea. When we found the families, the issue of uncovering an old wound for the families took us quite by surprise. And then the relationships that we established with the veterans, hundreds of veterans, going to reunions, gave us this whole other world that we'd never been exposed to. All of these people that helped change our history and provide so many rich details to this story. We wouldn't have been able to do it without them.
I think one of the most unexpected things that I got out of this experience in writing the book was the impact that meeting all the families would have on me, how close I became to them and how concerned I was with their own well-being, especially the Houston family. I wanted to make sure that all of the information that we put in the book didn't do anything to harm them. They really became like an extended part of our family, and I didn't anticipate that happening. There are two incidents that I wish had made it into the book, and somehow they managed to get edited out. One was, it happened at the time, and if you haven't read the book, you'll find this part where James had 3 G.I. Joes. He named Billy, Walter, and Leon. And he talked about going to heaven. And that was very intriguing for me. So I asked James at a later point if there really was a heaven and there really was a God. And he said, yes, there is a heaven and there is a God. And I thought, this is my moment to ask the question everyone has wanted to know their whole life. So I said, is God a man or a woman? And he said, he's not a man or a woman. He's whoever you need him to be at the time. And for a 3-year-old to say that was very profound to me. The other thing that James said that didn't make it into the book was one day I was washing dishes and I was looking at him playing out in the sunroom, and he just stopped playing and he said, Mama, before I was born, I was a pilot and my airplane got shot in the engine and crashed in the water, and that's how I died. And then he just went on playing.
And then there are 2 items that come to mind. One is something he said one day. It was actually my birthday celebration, and we went out for a brief walk. And I was telling him about what kind of trying, stressful day it was, and his comment back to me was, well, every day is like a carrier landing. If you can walk away from it, you're okay. And then the other thing that he did, I had built him 15 or 20 different models hanging from his ceiling in his room. And I built an FM-2 Wildcat, which is the plane that Houston was in when he was shot down. And before we hung it up on the ceiling, he told me that there was an antenna missing from it. And I said, no, there's an antenna on the dorsal fin stabilizer just behind the canopy. And he said, no, there was another one along the side. And I said, how do you know there was one along the side? He said, because when you'd climb into the airplane, you'd bang into it sometimes. Well, I went back searching through my records and found a small little square picture of the side of the aircraft where this little antenna stuck out, and then it was on the side of the aircraft that the pilot would climb up on to the aircraft on. I was intimidated by the process at first. Scared may not be quite the right word, but the issue of proving or identifying facts involving what James had to say had a lot of starts and stops to it. It wasn't one smooth process. There were times where a piece of information took a year and a half to find an answer to. At one point, when I realized that this involved reincarnation, I almost regretted starting the process because I was afraid that I'd prove myself wrong.
I think for me, after we found out about James M. Houston, and we were right on the cusp of locating his family and being able to find out what he was like, I was suddenly nervous that what if he turned out to be a horrible person? What if he was a womanizer who cheated on his kids and was a thief? I didn't want to find out anything bad because I knew that spirit was in my son, and I didn't want to spend the next 20 years scrutinizing my child, which I do enough of anyway, to make sure he wasn't going to turn out to be some sort of deviant or criminal. So at that point, I wanted to stop the whole search just because I was afraid I'd find out something bad. But after we'd researched enough of the families, and they all turned out to be stand-up guys, and my mom and sister said that they weren't going to let an escapee from Alcatraz fly, an expensive military aircraft, I decided it was okay to go ahead with the search.
There's two items to the message. One is that each of us carries a soul that's a gift to us, that has a spirit. And in this life, we carry that soul, and when we give up this life, that spirit moves on. And the issue of traveling through eternity is something that a lot of people I've spoken to walk away with. We routinely get into that kind of discussion after I do a group presentation, and I've probably made 25 or 30 of those. The second thing is the issue of listening to your children, that by listening carefully, in spite of the fact that some of this really was of a concern to us, that if we wouldn't have been listening carefully and paying attention to what he was saying, we would have missed this. It's such a rich, deep, spiritually driven story. And so the message to parents is listen to your children. They may have more to say that's of value to you than you realize.
Affirmative. Because this book is interesting enough, I think it would be more exciting if I wrote the book, because I know my own life experiences and some things they don't know, and I don't talk about it to them. I would just write my own book because I want people to know more about the story than just what they wrote. I understand it more. I feel that now that I know what happened, and now I know how much research they did and how much they did to just figure out just a tiny portion of my story, I feel great about it. Yes, I would like to be a fighter pilot or a flight instructor to try to teach other people about how to fly.
What kind of plane would you want to fly?
For a fighter pilot, I'd like to fly F-18 Hornet or an F-22 Raptor. For just training people, just a Cessna or something like that.